The long-awaited release of The Acolyte has finally arrived, and I've got a lot of thoughts on it, so let's get right into it. I first want to talk about the overall feel of the show. I think it does a great job of making it feel like Star Wars, but still distant enough from the prequel era, using things such as like the ship design and Coruscant not being quite as developed. That definitely gives it that look of 100 years before the prequels, but still very much feels like Star Wars. It also has a bit of a early 2000s EU story kind of feel, or sort of like a KOTOR feel to it, which I think is really nice. I especially think the music is great. It's very reminiscent of the prequels, particularly the music that's played in the credits. Now, getting into the events of the first episode, we obviously have the fight between May and Indara, and I've seen this brought up a bit about the knife that killed Indara versus like how Sabine was stabbed in Ahsoka. And while I don't like the whole getting stabbed in the stomach thing and being fine shortly after, I think in this case it's at least pretty clear that Indara did get the knife to her heart, so it's a bit different than her stomach. So at least it's a little more believable that way. A little later on in the episode where Osha has been taken prisoner, I like the moment where she's trapped in the cell on the ship and she tries to use the Force to get hold of Pip. Since she's obviously had training before, but since it's been so many years since that training, she's unable to do it. Instead, she gets lucky and Pip bounces over to her after the ship hits something. Maybe the Force kind of helping her out there in a sense, which makes sense because it's clear she's always trying to do the right thing when she tries to help that other prisoner with the thing on his face, whatever that was. But yeah, I think I like that little scene there. As far as other characters, I think Master Soul is awesome. He feels very much like Qui-Gon, and that both feel very reflective of the world around them, as well as their past memories and lessons for the future, and just very cognizant of the Force itself. I also like the moment where there was a fun little bit of banter between Soul and Jackie when she asked if Yord is coming. Those moments are always a great bit of comic relief against the heaviness of other things, while still feeling pretty natural in this case, similar to some moments between Anakin and Obi-Wan in the prequels. Now, my biggest issue with the first episode was that scene at the end with May and the dark side user, who we assume is a Sith. It just felt weirdly tacked on at the end there and did not fit the flow of the rest of the episode, almost like it was meant to say, here's what to expect in episode 2, but it was just way too abrupt for me. I didn't really think it worked. Now, over to episode 2, and as far as my interest going into episode 3 as well, whatever that crime that happened to the sisters when they were younger definitely has me fairly intrigued. I mean, if Torben willingly poisons himself, it has to be a pretty big deal, right? So I think that's the main thing to look forward to going into episode 3 and maybe future episodes as well. Now, as far as the overall look of these two episodes, I think there's definitely some instances where everything visually looks a bit off. It looks too much like a set and not like an actual in-universe location. And I think there's also just a few pacing issues here and there within the episodes, but those are probably my biggest complaints at the current moment. I also definitely subscribe to the theory that May's master that we see at the end of episode 1 isn't actually the true Sith Lord in the universe at the moment. If May is the Acolyte, then her master is probably just the apprentice, so I think there's probably a higher power somewhere in the galaxy that hasn't yet been revealed. So overall, I'd say I enjoyed the first 2 episodes. You know, it wasn't like the best thing ever made. I think it's a solid like 6, maybe 7 out of 10. But most importantly for me, it felt like Star Wars. And I think that should be one of the biggest focuses you have when making these shows. Now, we did hear about some episode 3 plot leaks, which I want to very briefly cover here. So if you're not interested in hearing about those, click off right now. But if you do want to hear about the leaks, then here is the general idea. So what I've heard is that May and Osha were born to 2 mothers. Supposedly there were these Force witches that kind of forced these women to become pregnant and have May and Osha as twins. That's maybe a very simplified version, but you get the idea. That's the important part. And there's been a lot of controversy over that, and I totally understand why. I think that is a horrible direction to take the show, and here's why. It is simply just completely disrespectful to George Lucas's story in regards to Anakin and the Chosen One. Obviously, Anakin was born without a father, and that's the only instance we've seen of that in Star Wars at that point. And this was because I believe, it's been a while since I read the Plagueis novel, but I believe that's because Plagueis was kind of tampering with the Force, trying to extend his life. So the Force kind of fought back on itself and forced Anakin to be kind of created without a father, as we've seen. And Anakin is the chosen one. He is the one to make the prophecy come true. There is no doubt about that. So to have May and Osha kind of be born similar to that, I think is completely disrespectful to Anakin, to the story of the chosen one, and to what George Lucas created with Star Wars. But again, that's just the leaks. That's what we've heard. Obviously, we've got to see the episode before we come to any real conclusions. So we will just have to wait and see and then find out from there. But anyway, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.